What's up, Open Floor Globe? I'm your host, Michael the Pod Pina, and I'm joined today by a very special guest, my good friend, Sports Illustrated senior writer, extremely proud Philadelphian, the one, the only, John Gonzalez. Gons, this is the first time that we've interacted in a professional capacity since we became coworkers. I'm not only thrilled to have you on to chat about the short and long-term future of your all-time favorite athlete, Ben Simmons, but we're also here for you to tell the Open Floor Globe all about your new podcast, SI Weekly, which, to be quite honest, has already done the near impossible and vaulted up my own personal list as a must-listen show. Before we get into it, a quick reminder to our listeners to please keep your questions coming. John and I will open up the mailbag in a little bit after we preview the trade deadline. Openfloormail@gmail.com. That's openfloormail@gmail.com. Okay, so Gons, I could go on and on about why SI Weekly is great, but you're far more qualified to talk about it. So please, the floor is yours.
This is so great. I'm so excited to be your coworker and to do this with you. And I was talking, we had Howard Beck, our SI coworker on the very first episode of Sports Illustrated Weekly. But you said that this is the first time that we've interacted in a professional capacity. We've always been professional adjacent, right? Because you and me and Beck and Dan Devine and Paul Flanner and all these guys who are NBA writers worked at different outlets. But it was like we were at the same company because we were on the road together all the time. So, but now we're actually at the same company. It's amazing.
It is. It's a true joy, a true delight. 2022 could not be any better.
It's wonderful. Although you decided to antagonize me by wearing a Boston Celtics hoodie, which I feel like is an attack.
I did.
Right out of the gate, you just started with an attack. So I'm just throwing that out there so everybody knows what's happening. Yes, we have a new podcast called Sports Illustrated Weekly. Please listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. The basic idea here is very simple. Everything you love about Sports Illustrated storytelling and reporting in magazine or online form, we are trying to take that and deliver it in a podcast every week. So if you're familiar with, say, HBO Real Sports, where they have multiple stories every week in narrative form, that's what we're doing on Sports Illustrated Weekly. Every Wednesday, you get a new episode. Last week, for example, was our Olympic preview where we had a piece about Erin Jackson, who's you're going to hear a lot about at the Winter Olympics. Fascinating story. Pina, she went from roller derby to one of the best speed skaters in the entire world in 4 months. Her rise was so rapid, so unforeseen, and so cool. She also became, in the process, the first black woman to stand atop the podium at the World Cup, which is so cool. We had Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor, on to talk about the controversy surrounding the Beijing Games, human rights abuses by the Chinese government, and the political boycott. And then we finished off the episode with Michael Vick. Michael Vick was on the podcast to explain to us, everybody knows about his rise and fall. That's been well documented, but we wanted to talk to him about the first time he was on the cover of Sports Illustrated and who he was before he was a household name, just as he was starting to rise into everybody's consciousness. And that was just a great conversation. So you get stuff like that every week. This week, we've got a story about how SoFi, which will be home to the Super Bowl this week, how SoFi has impacted the Inglewood residents who live next to the building, right? It's an incredible stadium. But it's also right in the middle of a neighborhood that's predominantly black and brown. It's over 90% black and brown. So what's that like for those residents? We have a piece about Brian Flores and the NFL's hiring practices. And then we finish up with, for everybody who's an NFL fan who knows about the Around the NFL podcast, Chris West. It's one of the best football podcasts in the world. Chris Wessling was one member of the Around the NFL podcast. He's also my really good friend. And he died last year, 2 days before the Super Bowl, from cancer at 46. So we have a memorial for Chris. So stories on stories on stories.
Well, that all sounds very beautiful. I'm sorry to hear about that and your loss. And I was about to say that all these names and subjects that you guys are covering. Like, my dream is to be a guest on this show, and I just feel like it will go so downhill as soon as I come on, Gons.
That's happening. That's happening. We had back you and I. Don't. You know what? I don't like this. Don't you dare sell yourself short. You and I have already talked about a subject that you wrote a really incredible piece about the NBA's continued fight for expanded social justice, and that's something that we want to discuss with you for sure. And plus, I am quite certain the moment we have you on, downloads, listens, ratings through the roof. Through the roof.
Potentially. We will see. Do not show me the data if that is not the case. Okay, so Gons, I want, this is a basketball podcast. You are one of the most visible Sixers aficionados in my life. And you know a lot about the team. You're very emotional about it on Twitter. I very much enjoy it when you get upset.
That's such a genteel euphemism.
Not a lot of reason to be upset right now, though. I feel like as a Sixers fan, Joel Embiid is rolling. He's arguably, I personally don't think he's the MVP right now, but that's fine if you do. He's great. He's
another attack.
Totally dominant. Yes, and.
Lights.
I know. I'm sorry. But I want to ask you off the top before we jump into some trade talk, because the deadline is Thursday, obviously. Yeah. What do you think about this Sixers team right now? Do you like them? Are they endearing? Do they make your blood boil from time to time? Just what is watching this season felt like for you as a Sixers fan?
The answer to your questions is yes, but that generally tends to be the answer to the questions when it comes to the Sixers. I look. Having 0 games of Ben Simmons all season and being a game and a half out of first place in the Eastern Conference in a year where the Eastern Conference has been like, the parity has been exceptional. It's been a weird year. You're not really sure who's the best team in the conference. Everybody expected it to be the Nets. The Nets have lost 8 straight as we record this. So that part's been incredible. Getting to watch every night in and night out, dominant, clear front runner for the MVP, Joel Embiid, has been a revelation. I've really enjoyed that because now the world has been put on notice that Joel Embiid is the best player in the NBA, as everybody in Philadelphia had already known. But but there are nights, right? There are nights when they inexplicably lose to like the Wizards without Beal, and you're like, what's going on here, right? Is this actually like a championship contender, or is it just a team that is going to pretend to be one and then, as we've seen the last couple of seasons, get into the playoffs and then be disappointing? I hope it's not that, because this has been such a fun season from Embiid that I really hope they don't waste it.
I feel like our listeners, those who hear me, I feel like I speak negatively about Embiid more than I should. Like, I think he's incredible. Do not get it twisted. So I'm going to be pro Embiid on this podcast, on this episode.
You got to know your audience.
I do. The Wizards loss, I wasn't that concerned about that one. I mean, obviously the Wizards stink, and you don't want to lose games like that. But the win over Memphis a couple days before that, which was one of the most entertaining games
what a game.
Of the season, to be honest. It was a great game. Maxey sealing the deal at the buzzer with that layup, that full court layup. But just beating that team, which I think I've been watching a lot of Grizzlies basketball this season, as a lot of our listeners have, and a lot of people who watch and love the NBA have. Yeah. And they're real tough, regardless of where they play, on the road, at home, and so they're so fun to watch. And that game right there, without Embiid, I thought that win kind of, I don't know, I don't really say things like statement win. I don't believe in stuff like that. But that was a very impressive victory to me. And it kind of, it made me more bullish on, okay, we should trade Ben Simmons to get something in that slot, because we're a very good basketball team and we're deeper than I think people give us credit for.
Yeah, and I mean, you hit on somebody right there where, first of all, I want to make my position very clear on this. Okay. Should they trade Ben Simmons? The answer is yes. And there really has not been a trade yet that I've seen floated where I was like, the Indiana, like early on before Brogdon signed and he was still available to move, and there was like rumors about Brogdon and LeVert. Yes. All of a sudden the Kings want to maybe move Halliburton or Fox along with like Hield and Harrison Barnes. Yes. Oh, Atlanta's interested. Atlanta would be a great city for him. Let's ship him off. Yes. Like all of the answers to your question on should they with Ben Simmons end up being yes for me, with one caveat. And you touched on it just then. Tyrese Maxey.
Okay.
Like that's probably a line that I draw because they don't find out how good Maxey has been and that they have this young, cheap player who is a joy and a delight, not only to watch on the court, but to interact with like as media members. The city loves him. They don't find out about any of this if Ben Simmons is playing. So that's a line where I'd be like, okay, step too far. Everybody else is available shy of Joel Embiid. Take them.
Okay, so I mean, this brings us right into my first question for you about this, which getting a little bit more specific, which is, there's these back and forth rumors between about the Sixers and the Nets and James Harden and Ben Simmons. And who knows what to believe. I personally do not think that a trade will happen before the deadline involving Harden and Ben Simmons. But, theoretically, let's just have a conversation about that being a more realistic likelihood in the short term. So you're telling me that if Tyrese Maxey, if the offer was Tyrese Maxey and Ben Simmons for James Harden, that the Sixers should say, like, absolutely not. Like, we'll give you Curry, we'll give you Thibault, but Maxey's the kind of the deal breaker for us.
That's a line for me. I mean, like, I'd have to think about it, obviously. I mean, like, am I really saying, like, oh, Maxey is the end and I wouldn't do the James Harden deal? It would be really tough. I mean, James Harden is an exceptional player. Even by his, this season, by his standards, has not been quite as good as the outrageous seasons that he's had previously. His numbers are still silly, though. You look at his numbers and like he's still killing it when he's out there. But I do wonder about like, moving off of Tyrese Maxey and having him locked down for a long time and like what he could become versus, paying James Harden into his, 35, 36 age season. And I still think his game is going to age well. I think his game is going to age well. You
are in the minority, my friend. You are in the explain. I would love to hear
I'll explain because his game was never predicated on like hyper athleticism, right? I mean, he gets to the line. He's an artist at drawing fouls. And I know that other people aren't as into free throw shooting as I am. I love the art of drawing fouls. I know it's stupid, right? Like people are like, oh, that's so boring. No, it's an art form. And it's such to have him and Embiid together just shooting foul shots all game. Yes, please give me that. So I think that would be, I think that's going to age well because like, it's not like he's like dunking on people, right? He's just really good at getting to the line. He's an assassin with that step back three, and he's an incredible passer. I think it could be like some form of, a Chris Paul elder statesman where he's just still impacting the game in that like slow-mo change your pace kind of way where it's just aggravating and it shouldn't work, but I think it will.
Okay, so the Chris Paul comparison is actually fascinating because I think a lot of people see someone on the other side of 30 in the NBA and they're like, yeah, he's done. Like James Harden's 31 years old and it's just like up downhill from here. And what we've seen with LeBron, and who's obviously a completely different category, but also Chris Paul, who's 6 feet tall and doing things that are completely unprecedented at his age and at his position, is the elongation of careers and the ability to thrive later on. So I do not think that Chris Paul had the same off-court lifestyle that James Harden had throughout his prime.
Speaking of genteel euphemisms, go ahead.
Yes. So I think that could be a factor. I think we've seen a little, the physical decline in terms of this guy loves having the ball in his hands, loves isolating, getting downhill and being able to draw those fouls that you mentioned. It's been a little bit harder for him, especially when he doesn't have the impeccable spacing around. And if this trade were to happen and someone like Seth Curry was involved, the spacing could get interesting, I think, in Philadelphia, particularly if he's on the court with Joel Embiid a bunch. So I think it's, first of all, I will say if I were the Nets, my asking price right now, and it would not budge, would be Simmons, Curry, and Maxey. And I just wouldn't get off of that because I, like you, I love Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah.
And I do not love what I'm seeing from Kyrie Irving, the individual going forward. And if I was the Nets, I'd be like, I can get Tyrese Maxey, who, by the way, works out with Kevin Durant in the offseason, and they're pretty tight. If I can get Tyrese Maxey in here and we can have that be the point guard of our future, like, let's do that. So I don't know if that's the holdup there, and that's why when you brought Maxey up as kind of like the potential deal breaker, it fascinated me because that's someone who, if I was Brooklyn, I would be all in for.
Yeah, and that's the sticking point, right? Because if you're the Nets, of course you'd want him, and if you're the Sixers, of course you wouldn't want to give up on Maxey. And then, in ESPN's piece with Woj and Ramona talking about like these negotiations, both sides feel like they have the leverage, right? Like if you're the Sixers, you've got a young Ben Simmons who can influence the game in so many ways, although there are a couple of ways he influences it negatively, but on the whole, like he does a lot of like positive things on the court. He's an incredible rebounder. He's awesome on the break, otherworldly passer, just top tier defender who can switch 1 through 5. I mean, there's a lot of things that you look at it and you're like, those are positives. And then if you're the Nets, as they pointed out in that piece, why would you move Harden for anything south of what you could get this offseason when the Sixers, in order to get him in a sign and trade, would have to clear a ton of stuff off their books? Because I think they're at like $133 million for next season. So you're going to have to clear all that space out anyway. And to do so, you're going to have to give up a lot of players. So if you're going to have to do that in the offseason and you want to do it now, like they're still going to need a massive haul if you're the Nets. So I think that's part of the holdup, is that both sides go, oh, we've actually got the upper hand here.
So in this world that we're living in, where this trade is inevitable in the next like 48 hours,
I don't
if the
believe
Sixers
that,
were to,
but I know we're doing it.
Oh, okay. Yes, because it could happen for sure.
It could.
But if I'm the Nets, I'm not, like, I still have faith in Kevin Durant coming back. I don't have faith in Kyrie getting the vaccination, but I have faith in him playing in every road game and us crossing our fingers and hoping we don't play the Raptors in a playoff series, because that would be bad. But like KD, Harden, I still think that they can right the ship. We'll see what happens with Joe Harris. I'd be trying to upgrade along the margins and add some more shooting if I was Brooklyn, and I would not be looking to deal Harden. But it could happen. But if the Sixers were to acquire Harden, let's say the package is Simmons and Seth Curry, is that championship contention for you? Is that even a favorite in the Eastern Conference?
I mean, adding James Harden and his offensive game, yes, I think that's a championship contention, especially in the Eastern Conference when, everything's up for grabs. Like, it's such a grab bag of who knows who's the best team in the conference right now, and a lot of things factor into that, including injuries.
Celtics.
Maybe not
we could
the
go
Celtics.
on and name some teams.
Yeah, just teams randomly that you'd throw out there. I absolutely think that would happen. I think that the Nets would want more than, Simmons and Seth Curry, and like you probably have to, throw Thibault in there if it's not going to be Maxey, and, a bunch of picks and some other things. I'm with you. It's just so surprising to me to think that the Nets would be willing to move off of Harden, KD, and Kyrie so quickly this season when they haven't really tried it yet. I mean, Kyrie was out. KD was coming off an injury from last season to this, or season before to this season. And this season's like the first time he's actually looked like KD, and then he gets hurt again. Harden's been like, he started slow. The new rules changes were messing with him. Like, to have the Nets even really seen them together to the extent where they can go, okay, we know exactly what this is going to be. I don't know that they have. And I'd just be shocked if they detonated so soon. It would be really surprising to me.
I agree. I think a little bit more bullish on the Nets than this 8-game losing streak has seemingly portended. And people are saying kind of ridiculous things about James Harden on podcasts that I'm listening to. Not SI Weekly, of course, but other podcasts I've been listening to have been pretty down on Harden going forward. I know I wasn't the most bullish 10 minutes ago, but I still think he's a top 12 player for sure in the NBA.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm writing... Okay, yes, go ahead.
About those podcasts, because Tim Bontemps from ESPN, who
I wasn't going to name names. I was, but
no,
yes,
I will name Tim. I like Tim, who was work adjacent for us as well. He had said that he would rather have the next 5 years of Ben Simmons than the next 5 years of James Harden. That's a tough one. I don't think I agree with that, just because James Harden is like such an impactful offensive player. But it's a conversation that's interesting.
The statement that really sticks out in my head from that particular podcast episode, and then we can move off of it. But
okay,
James Harden was called, I believe, Russell Westbrook with a jump shot, and that one really that one was interesting. But no, I loved him too.
That's hot. That's a hot take.
But yeah, no. So that was a hot take. But yeah, I want to now ask you real quick about the on-court, because I'm writing about this for this week for SI.com. The on-court relationship between, I got to plug my stuff even before it comes out, man.
I love the author. I love the site. I love both of those things. Those are great. You can't go wrong.
No, you can't until you read it. The on-court relationship, theoretical, between Harden and Embiid is actually pretty fascinating to me, because I feel like people are just assuming that it'll work and everything will be fine. Or maybe I'm misreading that. But Harden has never played with someone like Embiid, someone who needs the ball, loves the ball in the post, loves the ball in the mid-range, deservingly so, but is incredibly high, has an incredibly high usage that rivals Harden's over the past few years, and currently leads the league in usage. And Embiid has never played with someone who is also ball dominant, who is primarily, he isolates a ton, but he also is a pick and roll playmaker. And the thought of Embiid, like, I've always kind of wanted to see Embiid be more of a role man a little bit. Like, I think he would just be the most dominant if he was a high volume role guy. Not saying that he should be DeAndre Jordan 5 years ago or anything like that. But if you just tilted a few of the mid-range jumpers and a few of the threes towards being a roll man, pick and roll, hard dives towards the rim, opening things up for everybody else, catching lobs, like, that's unstoppable, man. And like, I don't know if he has the appetite to do that. And that would be fascinating to see, because if it worked and everybody's egos were in check and we were balanced and we were harmonious, then the pairing is unstoppable. But, if Embiid's like, I really enjoyed catching the ball 15 feet from the basket on the left wing, and now this guy's coming in here and he's taking a lot of those touches away from me. I don't like that. I'm the MVP candidate. He's not. And I feel like there could be a rift. Am I reading too much into this before it even goes wrong here?
One, I like that you referred to him correctly as the MVP candidate, so nicely done. Two, yeah, no, you're right. I mean, they haven't played with somebody like that before for both of them, so I could potentially see some problems. However, I would very much be glass half full on this one. I mean, you mentioned James Harden being like a pick and roll virtuoso. He is. I mean, like, he's so good with that. You give him a big and somebody to roll to the rim, and he's incredible. It's not like the Sixers haven't done that previously. And their version of the pick and roll or the pick and pop was when they had JJ Redick, they would do the dribble handoff all the time, right? So instead of that, you get James and Embiid in a room, and I think they figure it out where they go, man, imagine how dangerous we would be in the pick and roll or the pick and pop together. Like, those two guys and putting the defense in the mixer, like, that is exactly what you said, unstoppable. And I think ultimately, especially with Embiid, yes, he has been a usage monster, right? He is incredibly ball dominant, but Ben Simmons was ball dominant in a bad way. like previously with him. And now you've got a guy who can actually shoot the ball with him. So I think it would be a great matchup, a great pairing. And I look forward to their successful union. I will send them gifts and wish them salutations. I think it's going to be great. I'm hopeful. I don't think it's actually going to happen, but I like the idea of it.
Yeah, so let's talk more about Simmons. And before we do, we actually have an email that I did not include in the outline that came in at about midnight gone. So I'm not going to read the email, but because it's very long. It was written by a listener named Tim, who basically wanted to know why Brooklyn. And it was not our friend Tim Bontemps. All
right, I'm just checking.
Sadly.
I don't know. Could have been
a different Tim, but this other Tim. Wrote in
definitely not
wanting
Tim
to know
Bontemps.
Tim, not Tim Bontemps.
All right, go ahead.
Wanted to know why Brooklyn doesn't trade Kyrie instead of Harden. And so my question off that to you is basically, do you think Philly, and this has been talked about all season long, but now that we're getting down to the trade deadline, it's more interesting to me. Do you think Philly would accept Kyrie for Simmons right now, just straight up? Or is it like there's a million reasons why you're not very attracted to getting Kyrie on your team, one of them being that he is can be an unrestricted free agent this summer. So it could be just a couple month rental and then he's gone. And then you've kind of squandered this great asset in Simmons. But do you think that would be palatable to Philly at all or not?
All right. There's a lot of factors when it comes to Kyrie, right? Like there's a lot of variables that are baked into everything. Just from
there's some city mandates pending. It's complicated.
There's so many. I mean, like as you mentioned, he could become a free agent. He's got the vaccine consideration, all of these things. Just from a basketball component, I think he'd be great. I would take Harden or Kyrie over 0 games of Ben Simmons. That feels like an upgrade to me. However, considering the other factors, no, I don't think that's a great fit because what Morey's looking for here, it seems to me, is somebody to pair with Joel Embiid for more than like a half of a season, right? I mean, you're trying to not only maximize this window of Joel Embiid's, MVP caliber season, but seasons where like you want to put yourself into the mix as an Eastern Conference contender and beyond that, an NBA title contender for more than just this year. And with Kyrie, there's so many unknowns. You just cannot be certain that he would stick around, and to move Ben Simmons for that uncertainty doesn't make much sense to me. Whereas with James Harden, it seems like there would be some sort of agreement that yes, James Harden will be re-signing and staying put, or if you were going to move him for Beal or Dame Lillard or whomever, those are the big pieces that you want to have paired with Joel for more than just right now.
Yeah, I mean, Harden obviously has the relationship with Daryl Morey, the relationship with Tad Brown, the relationship with Michael Rubin, that make it. If he's getting traded there, they're maxing him out, and he's going to probably retire there. One would think. Where with Kyrie, there's no previous relationship with Daryl Morey. There's no,
and
Kyrie
he's such a
already
wild
has
card anyway.
Wild card. That's the euphemism right there.
Yeah.
He already has the ring. He has reportedly just basically called basketball a job. He's reportedly would threaten to retire if traded. Just like there's a lot of stuff there that I just wouldn't be as attracted to Kyrie as I would James Harden, saying nothing about them as basketball players. Because right now, honestly, when I watch Kyrie play, I don't know if he is better than James Harden. Like when Kyrie does play, it's like he's just like he's a wizard, man. Like the fact that he just sat out this whole season and then came back and just picked up like nothing happened is like remarkable. I don't understand, but he's really good still.
He's incredible.
Very, very good.
He's incredible. Yeah, if it was just basketball and you knew he was going to play and you knew he was going to stick around, then the answer is yes. But it's not. It's not just basketball, and there's so many variables that need to be considered when you're, working through this equation that I would be very surprised if that's something that Morey would entertain. But my main thing, and again, I don't think that it'd be really surprising to me if Morey could pull off something big by Thursday, because it feels like all of this got started a little late. But my point overarchingly is that, like, I trust that Daryl Morey has a plan. He's been one of the best general managers in the NBA since 2006. He is considerably smarter than I am. And I just believe that, like, he's got an idea of what a reasonable, like, equitable return on Simmons is. And if he can't get it by Thursday, I'm confident he'll get it in the offseason.
So this brings us, you're just naturally segueing us into these other questions that I have.
We're
for you.
professionals.
Just like
Look at this.
Obviously do this for a living. Yeah.
First time
Incredible
we've ever
stuff.
been on a pod, already working the weave together. You and I doing the pick and roll.
Amazing, amazing stuff. Rohan is just sweating right now, wherever he is listening to this episode.
We would never trade Rohan. I'm just keeping the seat warm.
No, he's untradeable. So at the top of the show, you mentioned a few rumored packages for Simmons. You know, they're going back to the Pacers deal. There's a whole bunch out there that have been reported, that have been shot down over the past few months. I'm curious, though, right now with the deadline a couple days away, besides James Harden, who everyone is kind of locked in, laser focused on, just what is the most ideal package Philadelphia can get for Ben Simmons before the trade deadline passes, do you think?
You know, I thought that the package of Halliburton and Harrison Barnes and Hield makes so much sense just from a basketball perspective. Like,
that's a great package.
Yeah. And now, supposedly, it was something in that neighborhood. And then, you know, the Sixers wanting, like, way more on top. But just from a basketball, like, if you're talking about the Sixers competing this season, you add in, you know, like, you've got Tyrese Maxey, you add in Halliburton, and, like, they're sharing minutes, and all of a sudden your point guard situation's shored up. I love Harrison Barnes. I think he's so underrated. He can do so many things for you. And now all of a sudden, like, that Tobias Harris, Danny Green wing situation that has not worked out incredibly well, where Tobias Harris has not had his best season and has struggled. And, like, he isn't as good a defender as Harrison Barnes is. Harrison Barnes is just like that glue guy who can do all of the things you want on the wing and doesn't get nearly enough credit. And then Hield's a killer shooter. I mean, like, what wouldn't you want in those three from the Sixers perspective? I think that fits perfectly. But that's just a basketball consideration, and that's just a team building consideration, and it's not a long-term asset consideration. And I think that's probably why it's not happening. And also the Kings pulled out.
So
supposedly.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. Well, I think Halliburton is someone that they do not want to move in any transaction, nor should they. He's incredible. His performance against the Sixers, what was that? That was a few weeks ago now.
A little over.
Was it was the most transparent cry for help I think I've ever seen on a basketball court. It's like this guy was doing literally everything. He hit that corner, that's like sidestep corner three in the fourth quarter. I was just like, this guy really, really wants to get traded to the Philadelphia 76ers.
When he came off the
just
court,
like 10 out of 10 on the job interview. Yeah.
When he came off the court, I thought he was going to request asylum. Like, just I'm a political prisoner. Please don't ship me back to Sacramento. I mean, it would. So he'd be great with them.
No, he would be terrific. So if I'm Sacramento, my offer is more like, you know, Buddy, and you waxed on Harrison Barnes there. Harrison Barnes would be terrific. Basically anywhere, he's a great fit in any situation. And like Buddy and if I'm the Kings, I'm probably like Buddy and Barnes for Simmons and like Danny Green, and then the phone just like hangs up. Nope. And that's why I think that their negotiations aren't going anywhere. So I think the Kings are interesting. You know, Plus,
I would love for Simmons to move to Sacramento. I think it's just delightful. I think he'd do great there. Sacramento, as I've described previously on other podcasts, is the Cleveland of California. And, you know, I think they'd be great.
Is that a compliment?
So
Is that a compliment, Gons?
What I love about that comparison, whenever I make it, is that it angers both the people of Sacramento and the people of Cleveland, because both of them see that as an insult to the other. So everybody wins.
Everybody wins when you make everyone else unhappy. I like your style.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we talk about Harden a lot. The star who I feel is just out of the spotlight here for obvious reasons. His team stinks and he's hurt. And our producer Shelby probably knows where I'm going with this. But I just don't understand why, like right now, Simmons and a first for Dame Lillard. Like, just let's make this happen. Like, what are we doing? Honestly, like, it just makes so much sense. The Blazers season is over. They just traded Norm Powell and Robert Covington for two worse players and a young prospect. Like, they're clearly trying to cut costs. I would not be shocked if CJ McCollum was on the way out next. And they're very far from title contention. It would do them much good to send their greatest player in franchise history to a situation where he can contend for a championship once he's healthy. He's got the ab injury right now, but there's no reason why I think he wouldn't come back after the All-Star break at some point for the stretch run with this team. And he's also under contract for, I think, 4 more years, 31 years old. And we talked about CP a little bit earlier, and him. I think that Dame could age pretty well with the way he shoots the ball and the way he plays on offense. So, I just feel like that's the best deal for everyone. And then if you're Simmons and you're Portland, I don't think that, Simmons is in a situation where all of a sudden he can play, he can be a 0.5, like a true 0.5. They'll re-sign Anthony Simons. They'll have a really nice draft pick. In this year's draft, they have ownership with deep pockets still for now. So I just think it's like that's the trade that I just want to see, and I feel like would be just best for the NBA, if that makes any sense. Why isn't Dame still as ballyhooed in Philadelphia, do you think?
Well, look, Dame would be awesome. You've interviewed him. I've interviewed him. Anybody who's come into his orbit, he would be a perfect fit for Philly. He's the kind of guy who would definitely understand the city and understands that kind of vibe. And I think he would be a great match with Embiid on and off the court. So yes, that would be wonderful. But, during the offseason when he's saying, I'm not going anywhere, I love Portland, and we're going to give it another run here, maybe he's reconsidered, especially because, as you mentioned, they moved Robert Covington and Norman Powell just because of tax considerations. And they're waving the flag, and now there's reports that maybe they might be thinking about moving CJ McCollum as well.
Please do.
Right? So maybe
Please.
if you're Dame, you might be all right, look, I gave it the college try. I do love Portland. Obviously, they're doing a hard reset here. It might be time for me to take my leave, and Philly would be a really great landing spot for me for all the reasons that you just enumerated. I would love that. I would prefer Dame to James Harden, but either of them would be great. So I like the way you're thinking.
I want to twist this around real quick because we don't usually ask questions that are about the interest of the player. We always talk about team building and who's a good fit where, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
I'm thinking about as I was talking about Portland, I spoke about how that would be a really good fit for Ben Simmons. Is there a team out there, if you are Ben Simmons or you are Ben Simmons' agent or you are Ben Simmons' brother, whatever, that you're looking at a team in a situation and a roster and a city, and you're like, this is the best situation for Ben Simmons. If Ben Simmons ends up here, his career will get back on track. It'll get back to where it was a couple of years ago, or even I guess just last year. back to being an all NBA contender, back to being a perennial all-star, back to being, on a team, contributing in a team in a way where his flaws are masked and his strengths are accentuated. Is there a team out there that you think is just so supremely like wonderful for him?
I mean, there is a team, but I feel like it's, I'd really have to go through like each team and think about this because I'm doing it on the fly here. But and this is such a cop out, but like imagining him in the Draymond role, right? Like he'd be great. Like younger, bigger Draymond. That'd be awesome. But that's a cop out because it's the Warriors and they're like one of one in the NBA. Who else?
It's a wonderful environment in Golden State.
It's an awesome environment.
You can't go wrong there.
He'd fit in well because you've got the shooters and Steph and Clay, and for him to play the Draymond role he would be great in the Draymond role. I don't know though. I'm thinking about like other teams that could. I mean, a lot of teams could use a Ben Simmons caliber, but like the real theme of your question is, like what benefits him, right? And that's a different equation.
Yes. And I have an answer
to
this
please
question.
Tell me.
That, first of all, I don't understand. Like, I don't think the trade is going to happen now for a few reasons. But before the season began, or like a week into the season, I was like, Ben Simmons to the Charlotte Hornets for Gordon Hayward and Miles Bridges. This trade is great. Like it's just a perfect trade for everybody, and the fits are great. And then Miles Bridges like blew up, and that just kind of complicated everything. So there's a few other players there that you could slide in for him, PJ Washington, but like Gordon Hayward and PJ Washington, I do not think that is not what Daryl Morey has his eyes on if he's talking about James Harden. But I just think Charlotte would be like ideal in so many different ways for Ben Simmons. So first of all, you're on a pretty good young team. Your talent lines up with the timeline of the franchise player, LaMelo Ball. You're out of the spotlight. You're in a less aggressive market, let's say, nicely, than Philadelphia.
Sure.
LaMelo loves to shoot. I mean, he can shoot and he can pass, whatever. Terry Rozier loves to shoot.
Sure.
So you've got a backcourt there that will chuck the ball up and not really put Simmons in a situation where he needs to, which I think is paramount when we're talking about Ben Simmons in ways that he can protect himself, sadly, because he doesn't work on his game and improve. But just like playing, this is a team that's needed a center for years now. And I've always thought that Ben Simmons should just be a center. And
good luck with that.
Imagine him. Fair enough. But imagine him like as the 0.5 on this team that plays as fast as anyone. He's like the fastest person in the history of the NBA, literally. That moves the ball. He's a peerless passer. I just think that would be super fun, and in the short and long term, I think that it would serve him well.
Look, all of the things that you say make sense from an academic perspective. The problem is that it doesn't take into account Ben Simmons' evaluation of Ben Simmons, which is
okay. Yes, fair.
Like, do you remember a couple years ago? And I bring this up so earmuffs if there are any Sixers fans listening. When they're playing the Raptors, they get really close. And they lose Game 7 to Kawhi and and the ridiculous like 4 bounce shot, right? But it was an incredible series, and who knows what would happen if they had gotten through there. But in that series, they had to take the ball out of Ben Simmons' hand and give it to Jimmy Butler, and Brett Brown had to put Ben Simmons somewhere, and so he put him in the dunker spot along the baseline. And Ben Simmons hated it, and he told Zach Lowe that he hated it, and he said to Zach Lowe, "I'm better than this. I'm not this guy." So for whatever you think like would be good for Ben Simmons, I think your evaluation is correct. Ben Simmons disagrees. Like he believes supremely in point guard Ben Simmons, and that's where he wants to be.
That's a wonderful point that I can't really argue with. I would say that in the way Charlotte plays, he would have the ball in his hands. I don't think he would be exclusively in the dunker spot or anything like that. LaMelo can play off the ball. Rozier can play off the ball. Whoever they keep, pretty much. I mean, they play 5 out a ton. Just like the fact that they're bad defensively too. Like it's a perfect in like every possible way. And I wish he saw himself as more of a positionless nightmare than a quote unquote point guard and someone who needed the ball in his hands a ton. But yeah, I mean, you make a good rebuttal there for sure. And like, I'm not the biggest Ben Simmons fan, but I just want to see him. He's an entertaining player when he's in the right spot. Like I think about a couple years ago, 3-4 years ago, whenever it was, when it was March and Embiid was out and he went on that ridiculous run with the Sixers, and they were just playing so fast and I just want him to get back to that. That would be fun. Like as a basketball fan, that would be fun. So I think that would happen in Charlotte if he bought into it. But I don't think it's realistic.
I wish Ben Simmons Godspeed and farewell, and nothing but well wishes in whatever city he ends up in. And I look forward to that happening. I look forward to him ending up in another city that is not Philadelphia, because I think honestly, it's and again, I am hopeful, but not, I'm skeptical that it will happen by Thursday, but when it does eventually happen, it will be to everybody's benefit, because this thing, obviously you can't put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It's broken. It's never going to be fixed. They're getting exactly 0 from Ben Simmons, and Ben Simmons is getting exactly 0 for them. So it's time to say thank you, but we should all go in our separate directions.
They're getting $19 million so far, reportedly. So that's fun for the Sixers, I suppose.
I guess. Sucks for him.
Yeah, it does. Do you think, speaking of this, do you think Daryl Morey can survive not trading Simmons before this year's deadline, which is not good because Joel Embiid is this MVP candidate who's just averaging like 35 and 15 and obliterating everybody, and you're quote unquote wasting a magical season out of him if you do not maximize the roster. So do you think that Morey could survive not trading Simmons before this year's deadline, and then also not getting Harden or Dame or Beal or All-Star X during the offseason? Like in this scenario, he doesn't trade Simmons, and then in the offseason it's like, okay, I'll take Harrison Barnes and Buddy Hield and Tyrese Halliburton. Like if that were to actually happen, would there be pitchforks in the streets of Philadelphia? Like how would that transpire?
It would not go well. Like when you asked me the question, can he survive not trading Ben Simmons? I was like, yeah, of course. What are you even talking about? And then you added the second caveat, and I was like, oh yeah, that would be bad. No, it has to work. It has to work where he has to get something of like significant value. He has to get a star caliber player, not just like. So Ben Simmons is a star. He's not a superstar, is the problem, right? Like that's always been the problem with why the Sixers haven't been able to break through, because as you mentioned, he hasn't worked on his game. He's actually regressed in terms of his shooting and his free throw shooting. But you can get somebody really good for him, or you should be able to. So again, I believe in Daryl Morey. I just think his track record as a general manager in this league is like really pronounced. I mean, he's really a talented, smart guy. And if it doesn't get done by Thursday, I am quite certain that there must be a plan. and I'm optimistic that plan will benefit the Sixers.
Do you have a favorite, like, just totally outlandish fake Ben Simmons? First of all, to our listeners, thank you for this all Ben Simmons episode. We do have a mailbag question we're going to get to right after this.
Nice.
But Gons, do you have a favorite, like, totally ridiculous Ben Simmons trade that will absolutely never ever happen, but in your brain it should?
I don't know if it's a should happen, but totally ridiculous. And wouldn't this be weird? And this is not mine. This is Pablo Torres. He brought up Ben Simmons for Anthony Davis, and I was like, well, that's completely nuts. But wouldn't that be weird? And I would watch that. Like, I don't know if it would be good for either side. I don't know if it would be good for either team or any of the players, but from a content perspective, like, that would be bizarre.
So I had not heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you're like
weird,
breaking
right?
my brain with that one.
Yeah.
That is very weird. Mine is very close to that, though.
Okay.
And I said it a few months ago, and the response was not smiled upon. But like Ben Simmons for LeBron James, like, it just makes a lot of sense. It does. Like, I could make the case right now as I could a few months ago. Like, the Lakers are doing nothing. Like, let's just be absolutely clear. Like,
right.
They have they're not going to win the championship this season. I'm sorry. It's just not going to happen. The Sixers, okay. If you are the Lakers and you are stuck and you cannot, by the way, I'm not trading Anthony Davis from the Lakers. That's like the one thing I'm just like absolutely not doing, because he's very good. But if you are the Lakers if you're the Lakers and LeBron James, who is 37 years old, he's playing tremendous basketball, but he's 37 and has recently said that when his son gets into the NBA, if he's not in LA, then LeBron's out of LA, blah, blah, blah. You're not winning the title this year. You're probably not going to be better next year, I would imagine, because Russell Westbrook will probably still be on your roster unless you traded him for John Wall, and LeBron will be 38 then. It's like, let's just get 10 years younger or something like that. Even more, like, how much older is LeBron than Ben Simmons? Like 10, 11, 12 years, something like that. Let's just get younger, and we'll have Simmons, we'll have Davis. That'll be our duo, and we'll go from there going forward. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And if you're the Sixers, you're like, we just won the championship this season, and they probably would win the championship this season if they had LeBron and Joel Embiid. So that's the trade. I love it. I come for me, haters. It's a perfect trade. I'm sorry.
I like that you threw it out there again after being met with skepticism by your listeners.
Mocked. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, from the Sixers' perspective, they're getting exactly zero from Ben Simmons right now, except for the monetary recuperation that you had mentioned. So yeah, if you could add arguably the greatest player of all time, yes, please. I think LeBron, being the shadow general manager of the Lakers, would be reluctant to trade LeBron, the player, out of Los Angeles to Philadelphia.
But can I ask why? Because
he lives in LA.
He would win the champ. Yeah, but it's like, this is 2 months of my life, and I get another ring, and I will have won a ring with 4 different organizations, like GOAT status. Like, I feel like it's a win for him. What am I missing?
What I love about this is that you prefaced it with, this is ridiculous and it'll never happen. And then I give you like just the tiniest little pushback, and you dig in, and you're like, no, this would be a perfect trade. So, I mean,
I got way too lathered up for that one.
No, I like it.
But I hope that it'll never happen, but I hope that it does, because it would be a lot of fun. Okay, Gons, we have time for one email that I wanted to get to read on the show before we get out of here. I'm not going to say it's the most it's the happiest, full of joy email that I've ever read on the show, but Simon writes to us, "Hello, team. Once again, you guys continue to be a great listen. What are your thoughts on a trade centered around Russell Westbrook and Julius Randle? Westbrook's contract, as shocking as it is, expires next year. Randle has not lived up to his contract at all and could look awful in the coming seasons. Not sure what team wins here, but could be a good reset. Thoughts?" This comes from Simon. Thank you so much. Simon from New Zealand. Gons, I'll just throw it to you. Like, how sad were you as I was reading that email, and what was going through your head?
Sad is correct, Simon. We appreciate the question. I think, you've heard of trades where both sides win. This would be a trade where there are no winners.
There's no winners.
I mean, look, Julius Randle has taken a hit in everybody's estimation this season. He's fallen off a little bit from last year's virtuoso performance, where he comes really elevated himself into a different strata of NBA stars. This season, obviously not as good. Russell Westbrook, I don't know what he is anymore. He's on the NBA 75 greatest players of all time list. Okay, good, fine, probably deserves it. But then I look at the way he's playing this year, and I'm like, it's brutal. It's brutal. So, and to just give him the ball and ship him off to MSG where he's going to be, a one-man show. I don't know. I don't know what Westbrook has left. I'm much more optimistic about Julius Randle.
Who is? You just answered Mike. First of all, before I say what I was going to say, it needs to be clear that this trade is not allowed by the CBA, and that Randle only makes $21.7 million, and Russell Westbrook makes $44.2 million. So you'd have to throw in Evan Fournier or another salary like that to make it happen. I was about to ask you who's better right now, Westbrook or Randle. And it seems like you're higher on Randle. Is that Randle?
Yeah.
Okay.
And part of that, part of that is you can't be sure what Westbrook is in the system that he's in. Like when he's playing with two guys who are high usage and just better than him right now. I don't know what Westbrook is anymore. Do you?
I do. He's. I'm trying to be as
diplomatic.
Nice as possible. I do know, first of all, I will say that he plays every night. He has not missed a game this season. So that's a positive trait, a positive element of what's happening.
A for effort.
But he took a shot against the Knicks on Saturday night. First of all, he comes up the left wing, maybe twice a game, 3 times a game, and just pulls up, tries to hit it up to bank in a jumper from 18 feet. I haven't seen one of these go in since Thanksgiving, maybe. This one hit the top left edge of the backboard. It didn't even touch the rim. There's just stuff happening that is just so detrimental to his basketball team. He might as well just take the ball, punt it into the stands. At least in that scenario, his team could get back and set up their half-court defense, which has been actually okay when Anthony Davis is on the floor. But he's just not it, and it's tough. I mean, he was benched in overtime of that game, rightfully so, for Taylor Horton-Tucker, and I think Taylor Horton-Tucker is one of the worst rotation players in the whole league. So, I mean, I don't know what to say.
Well, I guess that answers Simon from New Zealand's question. And we appreciate him sending it in.
Guns, I think that's going to do it for today's show. Is there anything we have not discussed, particularly with regards to Ben Simmons, that you want to get off your chest? I feel like we covered the whole gamut there.
No,
What'd you say?
The Ben Simmons Variety Hour, I think, is concluded. We appreciate everybody helping me work through this and it becoming a therapy session. But it was enjoyable. And, hopefully on Thursday we get some resolution. But if not, why not? We'll just keep doing this in perpetuity. You can have me back in the offseason to talk about Ben Simmons still being a Sixer.
What day does SI Weekly drop for our wonderful listeners to look forward to?
Subscribe and listen wherever you get your podcast to Sports Illustrated Weekly. It comes out every Wednesday with a new episode. So we've got that new episode for you this Wednesday. And it's a solid episode. We're excited about it. A lot of work goes into these shows. Unlike, you and me jabbering about Ben Simmons, we've got a whole production team that puts these together to make them more about.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
We had a 3-hour production meeting right before this episode.
We did. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it.
All right, Gons, thank you so much. Thank you so much to our listeners. Everyone, please remember to keep the emails coming. Openfloormail@gmail.com. That's openfloormail@gmail.com. Thank you to Shelby. Everybody, please stay safe. Everybody, please continue to enjoy the NBA season.